I think for me, I had this big focus on kind of checking boxes of I live where I want to live. So that box is checked. Having the husband by a certain age, that belief. And for me, really like career stability by a certain age or a certain salary or title or prestige, essentially. And for me, my life does not look like what I thought it would at 34. And if you would have told younger me that I wasn't yet married, I think she would have been like, what'd you do wrong? Like, where'd you go wrong?
If you guys are like me and wanting to be more mindful about what's in your products, how many toxins are in your products, and making sure that you're putting good things on your skin and into your body, I highly recommend Osea. I did a total revamp on all my products, and this is one I have been using and now is a staple in my bathroom. I particularly love their Ocean Eyes Age Defining Serum. I feel like I don't have bags under my eyes anymore, and I just feel really good putting this on my skin, knowing something good is going on my skin and into my body. So if you want to check out Osea's products, use our code QTCPOD10 to get 10% off your first purchase.
Very excited to welcome our next guest, Kayla. I found you through Instagram and DM'd you immediately because I love all the content that you put out, particularly speaking to 30-year-old women and this decade. As a therapist and someone who has lived through my 30s, I know it can be a wonderful, amazing decade of self-discovery, of self-growth, but there can come challenges with that in terms of like timelines and societal pressures and expectations. So I love what you are putting out there. And I'm curious what made you what motivated you to start posting this type of content?
It's so interesting. I've been doing social media sharing in one way, shape, or form for, 13 or so years now. And what I've talked about has changed throughout the years. And it's really always just a reflection of my own life and what it is I'm thinking a lot about, what it is my friends and I are talking about over dinner. And I think I realized that there was this interesting part of your 30s that I felt people weren't really talking about with a certain sense of openness. And we're all thinking it, or many of us are thinking it at least. So why isn't anyone pointing it out and talking about it? And for me, I've always loved exploring content that lives in that space of finding those things that we are all thinking about, whether we're speaking them out or not. So how can I explore that further?
What were some of the things that you thought about, hey, we're all feeling this thing, but no one's really talking about these things? Were some of do certain things come to mind when you say that?
My first thought is being in your 30s. And for me, I live in New York City. And suddenly there was just the mass exodus, as I called it. Some of that is due to the pandemic as well. And the exact age I was at the beginning of the pandemic, that a lot of my friends just left by the time we were 32 and kind of looking around being like, wait a minute. And almost I joke that like Sex and the City lied to me, that I thought in our 30s we'd all still be here together. And
drinking Cosmos.
Yeah, drinking our
talking
Cosmos.
About boys. Yeah.
And that hasn't been the case. And I still do have many friends that are here and stayed. But it was interesting when I just started to feel a lot of them have already left. And here I am still here with no interest of leaving necessarily. So I think that was like a really interesting moment of having that realization.
Did you feel like when some people were leaving and you were staying, were you like really grounded in staying, or were you starting to think like, because I know that this through my work with clients, particularly during COVID, people were making a lot of big moves, a lot of big decisions, a lot of life-changing decisions. And I had clients that chose to stay in the city and they felt like, I'm stuck, I'm not doing anything, I'm not making big changes. And there was a lot of angst about that and questioning about, what am I doing something wrong? I'm watching everybody else do these things. Did you feel any of that?
I didn't, in the sense of where I was living at the very least. I am a city girl through and through. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, and wanted to get out as fast as I could. I don't have any interest in going back there is my personal truth. So for me, I always have felt really grounded in New York City is where I'm supposed to be. Where I felt that more was career-wise and relationship-wise at the time, that it felt in many ways like all my friends in relationships and who were stable in their jobs were moving forward, and I was just kind of stuck. I had lost my job in 2020. I was newly out of a relationship at that point. And it kind of felt like, wait, everyone else is moving forward. But my life was really on pause for a good year and a half because of everything that had happened.
Yeah, I know. And I think it can be hard, as grounded as we can be, to not get into comparison mode, to not, especially in this decade. And tell me what you think too, because I feel like we talk a lot about here, like blueprints and timelines. And for a good amount of years, everyone seems to be on the same blueprint and timeline because, you know, depending how we're raised, high school, college, first job out of college. And then everybody starts to kind of deviate on different timelines and paths. And I think that can be really hard. And it creates this comparison that didn't exist before because you're kind of all in the same boat for a really long, like a good amount of our years, maybe up until 22, 23, 24, 25. Do you see that too, where you get to these ages and these paths start to diverge and then comparison comes in?
Very much so. I'm thinking of one of my friend groups, my group of friends from sleepaway camp that I'm still really close with. We're all the same age, within like 4 months of each other, same age, and really had that feeling of we all got bat mitzvah together. We all like were experiencing our first kisses around the same time and things like that. Graduated high school, all went to college at the same time. We're like really figuring out our like early careers at the same time. And then me at now 34 being like, oh, I'm the only one that's not married in this group. I am the one who stayed in the city and they all moved to the suburbs or out west. And it's interesting because I don't think it's comparison in the sense of I don't necessarily want what they have in many ways. That for me, I love so much of my life. So it's not that I feel jealous in that way, but it's more that kind of going back to the Sex and the City feeling of like, wait, we're supposed to be doing this all together. Where'd you go? Like, why are you not here with me to get brunch on Sunday and catch up?
Yeah. It's okay. So I want to do something different than I've done before, which is I pulled some things that you posted from social media because I and tell me if you don't want to do it. No, I just want you to speak to some of the things that you posted because I think the messages are so strong, so relatable. And I think through asking you to elaborate on these, I'll learn more and the audience will learn more about you. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading some of the things that I pulled that you posted. And the first one is this idea of shedding another layer of who I thought I had to be. And I got closer to who I was actually meant to be. So can you speak to that of who you thought you had to be and shedding these layers to get closer to who you authentically are?
For me, that was all about this feeling that I feel with every passing year of my life, I become more and more me, which is a weird thing to say because obviously I've always been me. Who else could I be? But when I think of myself now at age 34 compared to 33, 32, my early 20s, and I think of almost all these layers that I put upon myself of who I had to be, how I had to present myself, what I had to do for my career, how I had to lead a life, what a Saturday night had to look like in my life. I think with each passing year, I really picture it as like you shed a layer, you shed a layer, you shed a layer, and you're just getting closer and closer to like the core of like, this is your purest version of you. I don't know. It's my kind of like,
I love that
slightly woo-woo way of thinking of it. But I truly feel that every year you shed like more and more of kind of what society put on you and what the pressures put on you and what whether it's your upbringing or a mean girl in middle school put on you. And it's getting closer and closer to feeling like you are your most you and not doing things because you think you should be doing them.
Yeah. And you kind of answered this question before I was able to ask it, which is what was informing I had to be X, Y, or Z. And you know, if you want to elaborate more on that there, but there is these societal expectations or these pressures that, inform these ways of like, I have to do this or I should do this on a Saturday night. In my work as a therapist, all my clients know, and if they're listening, they're probably laughing because I hate the word should. it implies so much pressure. I don't think it's like aligned authentically with what we really want. Is there anything other than you already mentioned that sort of informed my life had to look this certain way?
Social media is definitely part of that, since we're seeing people play out their lives in real time in a way that was never a thing before, and seeing everyone else is having fun and I'm not. I think that aspect of it, or this is what they're doing, why am I not doing that, or should I be doing that? And for me, oftentimes it's then remembering, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
I see people going to, like, it's going to be a big festival this weekend here in New York City. And I know in my heart, I have no desire to be there. It's just not my vibe at all. And yet I know I'm going to look at those videos and have like a sense of FOMO, even though I know that is not like a thing that makes me happy being in that kind of environment. So I think social media really lets us see everyone's happiest moments and compare it to our loneliest or most down moments and think that, why am I not doing that as well?
Yeah, and I think it can be really hard when you're not grounded in the I want to or what do I enjoy. And even when you do know, there's still this moment of like, oh, that looks really, really fun. And I think I'm curious, my next question to this part is, how did you shed some of those layers? How did you get closer to this sort of more I want to, or this is who I am? Like, what is there some work you've done, or what helped you like shed those layers and get more clear for yourself?
I've always been really into self-reflection and kind of self-exploration as far as journaling. At the end of every year, I do a big journaling challenge to reflect on the previous year and then think about what we want for the next year. And I'm really big on that as a checkpoint, and throughout the year, having those little checkpoints. For me, I'm someone who definitely processes through writing. So if I'm trying to figure whatever it is out, I need to get pen to paper and just get it out on the page. Therapy has definitely been helpful for me as far as having that tool and learning additional tools to figure out what it is I want versus what it is I think I should have. And I think really just like having that frame of mind of, if I look at someone and feel that pang of jealousy, stopping myself and saying, I remember I had a business coach who we were talking about someone who had this amazing career that I really envied. And it was like, why are you not doing that? And then I realized I don't like creating content in the way that person was. That actually doesn't resonate with me. And it was kind of this feeling of okay, why are you not doing that? I'm trying to think of the better wording of it. But that moment of pausing and being okay, do I actually really want this? And checking myself when I start going into that loop spiral tendency.
We all have. Yes. Yeah. We had a guest on yesterday. We were talking about the value of slowing down in space in order to check yourself or self-reflect, because if we're not doing that, we're so distracted, we're not connected to ourselves. And it's really, I feel like from those moments, we're more susceptible to the comparison or the envy, or feeling like we're not doing enough, or I should do more, I should have this, or I should have that.
100%. When I taught yoga, one of my favorite themes to do was that intuition theme of checking in with yourself throughout class. Why am I doing this variation? Is it what I want to be doing? Is it what that person over there is doing? Do I really want to do the 10 times less version of this? And I think developing that sense of intuition, that gut feeling, and just continuing to strengthen it is so important, not just in that yoga, not just in that yoga setting, but also just in life, that how do we work that muscle and connect with it?
No, I love yoga. And I was just having this conversation, oh God, it's blanking me with who, but it was a comparison thing. I think we were in Miami for Shelly's birthday. I'm trying to remember where we had this conversation. It doesn't matter. Anyways, talking about, are you on the mat and looking at everybody else and what everyone else is doing? Are you in tune with what you're doing? And that's a good check of shit, am I the one that looks around to see what everybody else is doing, or am I doing my own thing? And I love what you said about the intuitive practice, because you can kind of do your own thing in therapy. I mean, in yoga, even if you can do your own thing in therapy too, even if the instructor they're guiding you, but you can still choose to do the own thing, and you don't have to follow the flow completely. I love that analogy so much. Okay. So we're talking about yoga. So I'll get to the rest of the prompts, but let's talk about your career journey, because you've done a lot of different things.
I have, yes.
Can you share with us sort of your career journey?
Yes. So backtracking way back, I was a theater major in college. That was my dream for the first 22 years of my life. I wanted to be a Broadway actress.
Oh, cool.
And while I was in college, I started my blog, which became my social media presence. And I also got really interested in fitness. So when I graduated, my goal was to be a fitness instructor on the side while I also auditioned. But by the time it was time to graduate, I was just so burnt out on theater. And the experience of theater school is really toxic in my experience and just really beats you down. And I just felt like by the time I got out, I had no real interest in exploring it anymore. I was also really struggling to get my start as a fitness instructor. I was 22, I was certified, but no one wanted to hire me in New York City. And it's kind of that vicious cycle of you need experience to get experience, but to get experience, you need experience. Yeah. Eventually, I ended up getting scouted by ClassPass, which at that time was called Cultivating. And they reached out to me.
I never knew it had a different name before.
It had a different name. At the time I was hired, they were Cultivating. And they reached out to me saying, hey, we love your social media presence. We have an open role. Do you want to come join the team? And I started out there part-time and eventually went into full-time work there. And it was my first 9-to-5 job. I did marketing and social media stuff there. And it was kind of my first intro into startup life and 9-to-5 life. I continued to do that for about 4 or so years. I had eventually lost my job at a fitness fashion startup and was kind of at this weird crossroads of, okay, what do I do next? I kind of felt like I had this moment to pause and figure out what are my next steps. So I decided to do yoga teacher training, which is something I had always thought in the back of my mind, but there had never been a good time because it is a big time commitment.
Yeah.
And I also applied to grad school for a master's in social media marketing at the same time. So I did my 4-week yoga teacher training and got into grad school literally on the last day of yoga teacher training. As the timing would have it. And throughout my grad school, I started building up my career as a yoga teacher and started a wellness event company with one of my good friends.
Amazing.
And gave myself the experience to teach. Eventually got hired at Core Power Yoga and Y7 here in the city. And it kind of felt like my fitness career that I dreamed of when I was 22 was finally taking off at age 28. And I became a certified bar instructor as well at Bar Method and made it my goal to teach full time. And leading up to the pandemic, I was teaching 16 classes a week.
Oh my God.
Not a lot of money in New York City. Fun fact, that is the bare minimum you would need to survive here.
That's a lot. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah,
to me,
it's a rough industry in that way. Pandemic happens, studios shut down. I'm left unemployed for a year and a half. And then when studios reopened, it just wasn't the same. I was exhausted. I was teaching maybe less than 10 classes a week, and it just felt like so much energy. I was making less money. The studios had changed the pay structure. So even if I was teaching the 16 classes, I would have been making even less money than before. And that's on top of not having health insurance, PTO, any of those kind of aspects.
Right.
So after a while, I decided it was time. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I made the switch back to what I call 9-to-5 life and went back to my experience in social media. I did have the master's degree in it and the previous experience at startups. And now I am the social media manager at bookshop.org for the last 2 years.
And how is it? Okay, so many questions on that. One, I think is incredible and remarkable that you made so many changes and transitions. And I'm curious how that was for you and what you learned about yourself and what you wanted and what worked well for you navigating all those different career changes.
Some of them have been really challenging for me emotionally. I think admitting to myself that I no longer wanted to be an actor was really emotional because it felt like I was leaving behind everything I knew and everything I'd been so focused on and so dead set on for my entire life. So that was a really emotional thing to admit to myself. Same with leaving fitness, that I was really emotional about it. And I felt kind of like I was a failure, even though I knew I wasn't. And the thing I had to keep reminding myself was I wasn't a failure. The industry failed me, essentially. And I had to keep coming back to that. Oh my God. But I'd met with like a career coach from my undergrad that they still let you like get free coaching or whatever. And I just cried on every session. Like that was just like I was just so emotional about leaving fitness, and because I didn't necessarily want to, but I also knew it was the right choice. Something I've really done and shifted and had a recent realization is the way I've looked at my career. Some people would look at how I've gone about it as a negative, as career hopping and this and that. And for me, I really just look at it as these phases and following that next thing and pivoting. And for me, all of them have been connected, even if they might not sound like it on page. But for me, they all feel very me and tap into different parts of who I am and what I'm really great at. So I've really just started to look at my career as different phases, and the fitness chapter of it closed at that time, and I shifted into the 9-to-5 chapter. Who knows if this will be a long chapter, a short chapter, a forever chapter, or what? And just looking at it as that way has been really helpful.
The beauty of it is like you don't know, and if you can we talk a lot about uncertain unknowns, and if you can embrace the unknowns, I think it's really could be an exciting thing to think about. Cool. Well, what would be next? Or maybe this is it, or how will this evolve? I think it's really hard to. Well, a couple things, I think, and we talk a lot about societal expectations. We don't live in a time where, my parents' generation, you stayed at one job forever. It was the one job for 20, 30 years, whatever, you retire. And then there was this progression to you stay at a job for 5 years, or you definitely don't leave before a year. And we're just evolving past that. And I think it's normalizing these transitions, these phases that, why not keep changing and trying and doing different things and aligning with what works for you. And I think so often, and I can think of a client specifically where even if we have a dream for something and then we go do that thing and we realize we've evolved or the dream changes, there's almost sometimes this guilt or this like judgment of ourselves of like, but this was the dream. I should like this. Why don't I like this? And moving through that to say, okay, well, what else would I like? I think getting stuck in narratives can create a lot of turmoil, but shifting or having different mindsets can really be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. I want to go to our next thing because
nice long tangent.
No, I love it. I knew this would happen. This is why I wanted to do this. Okay. The second thing was my life does not look like I thought it would. And is that specific to by this age?
Yes,
okay.
It's definitely by this age. It's funny when I think about that, the whole idea was, I've said versions of that of like, my life doesn't look like I thought it would at whatever age I was when I made that post. And focusing more on what life feels like. Because I think for me, I had this big focus on kind of checking boxes of, I live where I want to live. So that box is checked. Having the husband by a certain age, that belief. And for me, really like career stability by a certain age or a certain salary or title or prestige, essentially. And for me, my life does not look like what I thought it would at 34. And if you would have told younger me that I wasn't yet married, I think she would have been like, what'd you do wrong? Like, where'd you go wrong? Yeah. But when I actually like stop and think about what my life feels like, to me, I'm like, there's no version of my life where I should have gotten married earlier, given the way my life played out. And there's so much about my life I do love. So why am I comparing these things that are check boxes to how I actually feel living my life?
I love that shift of how does it feel? Because it can get really hard. Like we talk about checking the boxes all the time, and there's boxes that have been curated and put out there that we're supposed to be checking. And it's like, well, who made those boxes? And are those boxes I even want to be checking? And again, being really thoughtful about if it aligns. And I love that how many shifts you've been able to make. And you offer a lot of that on your Instagram. Like, life is not over.
No.
Everything is great. I think this one aligns a little bit with what you just said, but don't be so focused on what comes next that you forget to enjoy where you currently are. And I love this one so much because I felt susceptible to that in my 30s because I met my partner at 34. I froze my eggs at 37. I had my son at 40. And I felt like I'm behind. I haven't checked these boxes. Everybody around me is like checking these boxes 10 times over. And I became so focused on those boxes that I was overlooking how awesome my life was. And it was like an ebb and flow. There were times where I was really grateful and grounded in what I was able to do as someone not partnered up yet or someone not with a child. And then there would be those low moments of like, I don't have that thing yet. And it really wasn't until I was like, oh my God, I have all these amazing things, that those things then came into my life. So I'd love for you to speak to what that means to you in terms of staying focused on what we have versus what we don't.
I am not a very patient person.
Oh, girl, me either. Me neither.
Want it now. I want it yesterday, really. Yeah. I have that New Yorker mentality of I want to move fast and I want it to happen immediately. And because of that, I can definitely get frustrated when things are taking a long time. And I know I've had that feeling in the last year or so with my social media presence of feeling like, well, I want to hit like the next goal, the next thing, and then not even taking a moment to step back and be like, wow, I should be really proud of myself for what I've created, for these experiences I've been able to have, for this multifaceted career I've built for myself, for this life that I really love, living in a city that I absolutely love, surrounded by so many interesting people that I connect with, and doing what I want to do on a random Friday or Saturday and bopping around the city, listen to a podcast or going to see a Broadway show. So for me, I think I oftentimes get really caught up in, okay, what's next? That I really just don't even pause to celebrate when the wins happen or just enjoy where I'm at now. I remember even growing up, I was like so obsessed with college, and I wanted to be in college from like middle school. I was already like planning out I really wanted to get out of my hometown. That's a lot of it.
That's coming through very clearly. Yeah.
And I got to college, and then I was like, okay, now we're like focused on the next thing. And I didn't even get to enjoy some of the moments when they were happening because I was just thinking about what comes next.
Did you find yourself arriving, because this happened for me, like, did you find yourself arriving at the what's next and then being like, oh, shit, like I wish I was more grateful sooner?
It's that whole, what you have now is something you previously wanted.
Right.
And yet we so quickly forget that what we're living right now is a version of what we wanted before. And we're just so focused on getting to that next thing that we don't even appreciate that.
Yeah. Do you practice any like meditation, or like what helps you stay like grounded or be able to reflect and not, and the reality is we're all humans. We're going to get stuck in comparison. We're going to get stuck in those moments of what's next, but we have to have those tools to kind of bring us back and ground us. Like, what are your tools that you use? You mentioned writing and putting it on paper. Is there anything else that you do?
I think having that yoga background, even though I wouldn't say I practice yoga the way I used to, that I'm not in a class doing asana, the physical practice of it, having that background experience and so many hours of being in a yoga classroom, I think infuses into my life in that way of finding the little bits and pieces. I've definitely been exploring more breathwork stuff, but don't have a consistent practice necessarily. For me, it's definitely a lot of writing and a lot of like long walks, thinking and turning over ideas and getting to conclusions and figuring things out as I go.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the pace has a lot to do with our ability to kind of like be really reflective. Okay, my next one is the narrative of feeling behind. Can you speak to that? And are there moments where it sounds like now at 34, you're in a very good place. You're in a very grateful place. You're in a very happy place, like where you are. Were there moments where you felt behind in relationship, in career?
Very much so. When I think of how I felt on my 30th birthday, I felt I had hit a bit of rock bottom as far as I was unemployed. I was newly out of an 8-year relationship.
Wow.
I was living alone in New York City during a pandemic. And it just felt like I was at one. I was at like square one again. And it was just like, how am I turning 30? And all of these things that I've been not working on, but like had been building in my life are now gone and I'm starting at zero essentially. So I think for me, that felt like a real starting over experience and not something that I necessarily planned or any of us planned for. So for me, it was really that, especially when it felt like everyone around me was moving forward and I was just kind of stuck at where I was for the time being.
Yeah, I think it is really hard because, again, these constructs that tell us what we're supposed to have by certain times. And if we don't have them by certain times, it creates a lot of anxiety with us until we're able to say, well, do I even want those? Or why do I have to have it by this certain time? Or like we're saying, like, look at what you do have by this certain age. And I think it does takes a lot of intentionality to remind ourselves. I think it is really easy to get caught up in all of the, this is what I should be doing and this is by when I should be doing it. So I think it's so amazing, again, that you're putting out this content that sends different messages, creates different narratives. And I'm just curious what the feedback has been from other 30-year-olds to like see your content and feel grateful to have found a place that normalizes different things.
It's been very positive overall as far as people feeling seen and what I'm sharing is really resonating with them, which is, to me, the reason I started creating content in the first place. Was if I could help one person feel less alone with whatever they're going through, then like I feel really happy with the content that I'm creating. And it's been clear with the response, and even that for me, from like a social media strategy perspective, that I experienced the extreme growth of my account once I started sharing that kind of content, which tells me that I'm definitely not alone in feeling this, and that this is such a message that people are craving and need to hear. So in that way, it's validating. I feel that's a word with a weird connotation.
No, absolutely.
But there's definitely a need for it. It has become clear to me.
Yeah, absolutely. But before creating this podcast, I was hearing all those conversations. It was sort of what I lived through my decade as a 30-year-old. And then in my work as a therapist, I was hearing so many different narratives from women of like, everything we're talking about, comparison, running out of time. I don't want to waste any time. I'm feeling behind. And like, oh my God, like every woman, and obviously it's very confidential, but I'm like, every woman is coming in here and saying the same thing as like, we have to do something about this. So there's certainly a need for content like that, and women to hear different messaging of like, it's cool that you're 30 and single and doing your thing, or it's cool that you're 34 and traveling the world. Is beautiful. And I look back, I think one thing that happens too and did for me is like we get so focused on the outcome. And when I got the things that I was like the boxes I did want to check, the partner and then the baby, and I look back at my 30s, I'm like, oh, makes sense that this timing all makes sense now, because I look at what I got to do in my 30s. It's not impossible to do now. It's a little harder when you have like other responsibilities, but I feel so grateful for having that time. And I think continuing to spread this message of like, there's so much opportunity here. There's so much we get to do.
For sure. When you said that, I had a recent realization that I'm grateful I didn't get married in my 20s. And that's saying I was with someone who I love a lot. We're actually back together now. So I certainly don't have anything bad to say about him. He's a great guy, but we had stuff to figure out. And
wait, hold on. Is this the 8-year relationship?
Yes.
Wait a second. Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're back together.
Amazing. I know, because, we did some social media stalking, prepping for this, but, and tell me if I have this wrong, but from what I saw, it was you were a little nervous to kind of announce the relationship because you are putting out this content of being single in the city and navigating your 30s. And so you did share kind of like, this really amazing thing is happening in my life.
Yes.
But I a little hesitant to share. Can you talk? I think that's so incredible, by the way. Oh my God. Can you share more about that? I think that's so amazing.
Yeah. Answering the first bit with the hesitancy, I think for me, it was this fear of I've built this whole brand around being single in your 30s and really loving your life. And do people feel like they're losing that part of it by me being in a relationship? And it was this really weird feeling inside of like my social media presence versus my real life. And I wasn't ready to hard launch him yet. And it was something we had discussed as far as wanting to figure our stuff out on our own before we went very public with it. Our friends were aware of what was happening, but I didn't want to like blast it on social media for all the world to see yet. And I was definitely I like had this image of like the second I said boyfriend, I would just lose all my followers, which is a weird thing. And I had a complicated feeling around it of like, am I going to keep my life one way in order to like keep my following? And that doesn't, obviously that doesn't make sense when I say it out loud. It's wild. So yeah, it was scary in that way. I didn't lose all my following. There was like, I definitely lost some followers on that day, but have since bounced back significantly, and it hasn't significantly changed anything.
I think it's, and I wanted to talk about this too in relation to friendships. I think it can be a really hard thing to navigate when you're wanting the things that you do want. And let's say sometimes they're check boxes, but sometimes we authentically want like the partnership. And then we see it happen for someone else. I'll be straight up honest, like literally before this podcast recording, I saw someone else pregnant with their second baby. And I just like, thank God Shelly's here to bring me back up. But you see those things and you're obviously happy for those people, but then you feel really sad. So I say that to say it's not a reflection of you. It's just their own discomfort or sadness with what they don't have yet.
Or what they want to follow on social media. If they want to follow someone that they felt similar to them, like I totally get that. I feel the same way of there's accounts that I've unfollowed when their life no longer feels aligned with my life in some way, shape, or form. So I do understand it. I think we all do a version of it.
Yeah. And it's okay. I think it's okay to hold space for both emotions. Well, one of the questions I did want to ask you is how was dating in New York City? And then but I also would love to hear how you reconnected with your now current boyfriend.
I didn't really have an experience dating in the city. That we broke up and did not want to be broken up, but had some stuff we had to figure out. So I had never ended up dating besides him, and we'd always kept in touch. And then in the last, I guess, year or so, we started going to couples therapy to figure out what would moving forward look like, and was there a path to move forward. So that helped us kind of figure it out and be able to feel more confident about like, okay, we're doing this.
Amazing. Yeah. I love that. What does the rest of this decade look like for you?
The rest of this decade? So I'm 34, so I got 6 more years. I don't know. I'm the worst at answering those kind of questions, because when I think about,
I just gave you the interview question of like, where are you going to be in 5 years? Oh my God. I just realized I did that.
No, it's sorry. All good. I feel pretty confident that I'll be in New York City. That part I feel pretty good about. Would like a beach house, but that seems less likely.
That sounds amazing.
I think he and I will be together and getting married in the next couple of years seems to be what we're both on alignment with. Yeah, for me, it's just always like, I just hope I'm happy and feel excited about whatever I'm working on and doing in life.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I think that, having had all these changes and transitions, sort of just being open to what's next and being comfortable with kind of not knowing.
Yeah.
Are there ways or things you would say to the audience to, and we've mentioned some, but like kind of take the pressure off so you can be excited about the what's next?
For me, I had a thought of, life is so much longer than I think it is, which is a weird thing to say. I think we're told so much of life is short, and I understand that sentiment. I understand the why behind why we have that cliche. But I also had a moment of like, life is actually really long. I'm 34 years old. I don't think I feel 34 necessarily. I think I feel.
Does anyone ever feel your age? I'm like 43. I'm like, what's that supposed to mean? I feel like I'm 25, except I go to bed at 8. So
for me, it's realizing like, there is so much time. Me joking about the beach house. There's the part of me that, because I'm impatient, I want it now. Of course, it's summer. I would love to have it right now. But also telling myself like, if you don't get that till you're 50, you still have so much life to enjoy it. I think about my parents and how they didn't start traveling until I was off at college or traveling a lot, I should say, until I was off at college, and how many incredible places that they've been able to go. And just to remember that there is so much more life left. So if you haven't checked that box off now, it doesn't mean you're not going to.
I love that
so much. And I think that's comforting to me.
I love that. And I love that so much. And just the idea that there is so much time, because I mean, the podcast is Quiet the Clock, right? And a lot of the narratives we're running out of time, but I love it being more expansive in that there is so much time. It's so funny you say that, because recently I have this thought, and doesn't really align with like focusing on what you have right now, but I'm like, I'm going to thrive as like a mom with adult children. My son's about to be 3, and it's like a new thought, but I just see like these cool like older women, and they're just like traveling and they're doing these things. Like
my parents, my parents.
Like that's what when you said your parents
in Las Vegas seeing the Grateful Dead, so they're living a great life.
I just it's been like a new thought of mine. I'm just like I'm going to thrive. It's like but to the point of there's so much time to still do so many things, and the message of like just because you haven't checked the box for a better term doesn't mean you won't. One other question. Well, maybe I have more questions. We'll see. As someone that struggles with impatience, I do too. I'm a very impatient person. I am the same. Like I think of something I want it like yesterday. That has not served me well in certain circumstances. So as someone that is similar to that, how do you try to stay patient? Because there's a lot of things that like we can't control, obviously, and can't control the timing of things. But for you as someone that also struggles with patience, how do you remain patient?
It's something I'm always working on. Let's be real. I think it's definitely using the reflection tool of seeing how far I'm going, even when it doesn't feel like it, because growth can feel so minute when we're experiencing it, but then when you look back. So I think for me, I really appreciate having certain checkpoints of times that I do reflect on the previous year. I have those like yearly journaling challenge that I do in December. I also have another thing that I do in September around the Jewish holidays that I answer the same questions every year. And
cool.
It's a really cool experience every year of I sit down and I'm like, nothing has changed in this last year. And then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like,
so you'll compare.
I go back and read. For that, I've been doing it since I was in college.
Oh my God, so you have all of them
I have since I was maybe 20 or so. It's a lot of answers to go through. So it's so interesting to go year by year and see what I was interested in, where I was in life, what I was struggling with, what I was excited about. So having those checkpoints, I think is so awesome. And even if you don't do something of that nature, but just like put little check-ins on your calendar to answer the same questions about what it is you're proud of in the last couple of months. What are you looking forward to? What's the number one thing you're working towards? And like celebrating a lot of those wins. And I think you'll realize how much growth and progress you're making, even when it sometimes doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Yeah.
That I know for me, sometimes I feel in many ways like, cool. I feel very stuck in the way that I'm like still multitasking many jobs. I kind of have the same job I did when I was 24. I'm a social media manager and with this content creation on the side, but then realizing when I actually take a step back of like, no, we have grown so much in both of those worlds and look at all these amazing things you've accomplished through them. So having those little checkpoint reminders, I think is helpful. I think for me also just going back to that, like life is long and reminding myself that like, just because it's not happening right this second, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And to just remember that there's a lot more time than I think there is for certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the reflection on the progress because it can feel slow, especially when we're reflecting on it ourselves. And I think an effective tool sometimes too is having a good friend or a therapist that can help you look at it and shift the perspective and be like, well, wait a minute, look at all these things. And like when I do that in sessions, my clients will be like, oh my God.
Because we forget.
Yeah,
we forget so easily.
But we forget and we're also looking at the next thing. And I've had it happen for me personally. And my friends will be like, but you've done this, you've done that, you've done that, and you've done that. I was like, oh, right. I forgot about it all. Or like lost sight of all those things. So that again, the pause, the slow down, the reflection is so important. Okay. One other topic I want to talk to you before we wrap up, but navigating friendships in your 30s. And we were talking earlier about, the paths start to diverge or people move or people get in relationships, engaged, kids, whatever. And how have you found navigating relationships in your 30s as those timelines, life paths start to change and look a little different?
It definitely looks different. And that is part of the thought process I had to go through of these friendships are going to look different. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. That my best friend who had lived in the city after college and we saw each other all the time, she's now living in the suburbs, recently has a kid. We're not going to see each other as much just because of the reality of it. But that doesn't mean I love her any less. She loves me any less. And the importance of our friendship is any less than it always was. So to me, it's acknowledging that it's allowed to change, but that doesn't mean we care about each other any less. And I found that really comforting. it's been a lot of that, of saying like, oh, some of these friendships look different now than they previously did. I, in the last year, did a really big effort to both deepen my friendships and then also start to build new communities, because I was really feeling that kind of sense of loneliness and just like almost detachment, since I work for a fully remote company. I live alone. If I don't make an effort, I don't have to see anyone throughout the day. And I started making an effort to put myself out there more in various ways, as a content creator, attending events I do a lot of book stuff. So like a lot of book events and kind of finding ways to be involved with that community. I joined a new gym that's really focused on community and that energy, and met so many new people through there. We always go out to coffee after our workouts. So it's like gives me that like social boost before I go home and sit in my apartment for the rest of the day. I've been trying to work on just deepening certain friendships in my life and just making more of an effort, and then also allowing myself to mourn those changes in the other friendships and acknowledge that, yeah, they look different. But like I said earlier, that it doesn't mean that we care about each other any less. And when we do see each other, oh my God, it's the best.
It's like no time has passed.
Oh yeah. To me, like we have like a date on the calendar for like end of July for me to see my friend.
That's how it happens now. It's like 6 months down the line. Okay, we're going to do that date.
Yeah.
That's what else.
But I know it's going to be amazing. And I know that us not being able to see each other before them isn't a reflection of anything about us. It's just that life is busy, and it's not a reflection of either of us not caring about each other. So for me, it's really just been putting that into perspective of it's not necessarily about me, which is comforting, but more so being grateful for like that friendship is still so important to me. So of course I'm going to make the effort when we can to see each other. And then how can I also bring these new communities and friendships into my life so that I feel I'm still getting that day-to-day aspect of it.
I love that intentionality of getting out there and creating new community and even just maintaining the friendships you currently have while accepting that they look different. Well, you have been amazing to chat with. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd want to share with our audience about navigating your 30s?
Come follow me. I talk a lot about it on social media through my Instagram, which is my name, Kayla Kleiman. I also have a Substack, Silly Little Things, celebrating the silly little and big things in our 30s, where I share ideas.
I love that.
Yeah, for how to spend your weekend itineraries, Sunday sips, so a lot of these like bite-sized ideas of little things to do for a better week. And I also just launched a social club if you're in New York City, the Silly Little Social Club.
What? Tell us about it. Oh my gosh.
So at the time of recording, we're hosting our first event this weekend. So it'll be a little too late. But by the time you're listening to this, there should be more events on the calendar.
Awesome.
And my hope is to bring more 30-something-year-old women together who have similar interests to me. I feel bad because I constantly am getting asked to like go out to coffee and meet up with people, and I would love to, but I'm also like one small introvert that has a full-time job and a side hustle that I rarely get to see some of my friends that I'm trying to make plans with. So my hope is to bring together the community and help foster those relationships and for people to meet other like-minded individuals in New York City.
And where can they find the info on events? Is it on social media?
I haven't said it out loud yet. Silly Little Things Social Club on Instagram.
Okay, cool.
And my own Instagram as well.
Awesome. Kayla, thank you so much for being here and sharing all that you did.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime.
So I am no longer a coffee drinker. Coffee is something I gave up in revamping my diet for my fertility health, which is very hard to do. But luckily, I found something amazing to replace it with, and that's my morning matcha that I use Coolie Moringa for. It gives me that same ritualistic feeling of having something warm in my hands in the morning without the caffeine. And I have loved having that as a replacement for my coffee. I love this product so much. It is delicious. And I honestly don't miss my coffee. So if you want an opportunity to check out Coolie Moringa, you can use our code QTC25 for 25% off your first purchase. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod.